I guess I should make sure that is the mayor with us? I see the superintendent. Julian, do you know? Oh,
I
he
don't
started.
He started see it yet.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna get started anyways. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order and with opening remarks as well. Today is the Municipal Accountability Review Board, Hartford Subcommittee of the MARB. It is April 30th and the time is 10:04. Thank you for joining us. And today is a Teams meeting, only a Teams meeting. We want to welcome Ed Levy to the MARB board, and he will also be participating in the Hartford Subcommittee. Ed, I think it might be helpful, but you won't be able to see everybody's face. If you could give a little bit of background, a brief background about yourself, and then we can have a quick maybe introduction just so that the board members, you can at least maybe see their faces.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. I currently work for the American Federation of Teachers, but until 2021, from 1985 to 2021, I was a teacher in the VOTEC system. The last 13 years of it on full-time release as an officer. This is going to be interesting for me. I do represent school districts in Norwalk, Meriden, and New Britain. So I do have, that's my public school experience. I'm doing that now. And I'm sure all of you are aware of what's been going on in New Britain. So that's been fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us here. I'm Kimberly Kennison. I'm the designee to the Secretary of OPM, as I represent him today on this board. My co-chair is Kevin Alvarez. Kevin?
Morning, and good morning, everyone. Welcome, Ed. I'm so sorry that I'm off camera right now. I've been trying to fix it. So sorry that I'm not making eye contact with you, but I'm Kevin Alvarez. I'm the treasurer's designee to this board, and I'm really excited to have you join us and for our meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, Ed. I'm Lisa Hammersley. I'm the executive director of the School and State Finance Project. I joined the organization in late 2019. You may know, but we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan education funding policy organization. And prior to joining the School and State Finance Project, I worked in the General Assembly as a budget director and also at the Office of Policy and Management. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Over to David Biller, and I know he is off camera.
Good morning, David Biller. And I've been on board, I'm not really sure how many years at this point, but I just want to say welcome to the board. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
I think that's it. If Mr. Falsigno, I do not think, is with us today, then today we were going to focus today's. You are? Stephen?
Good morning. Steve Falsigno, sorry. For some reason my phone, as usual, sometimes has issues. I just wanted to echo that. Certainly welcome him to the board and look forward to working with him.
Thank you, Steve. So today we're going to focus on the FY27 budgets for both the City of Hartford and the Hartford Public Schools. We've been asked to change the order of the agenda today to accommodate the Mayor of Hartford's calendar, and as well as the Board of Ed needs to end the meeting promptly, I think by 11:30, but I'm not positive if you need to get off sooner than that, Caitlin. You'll have to let me know.
11:30 is good. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a hard stop today at 11:30, and that's what I have for opening remarks. Kevin, anything that you'd like to add?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda is going to be the approval of the minutes from September 17th of 2025. Any discussion about those minutes?
No discussion, but I move approval.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And any second, please?
Second.
Kevin, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I need to hear from, thank you, Stephen. And I need to hear from David.
So I don't believe I was at that meeting, so I think
Okay.
I have to abstain.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, the minutes have been approved. So the next item on the agenda is agenda item number 3, which was to be the discussion of the Board of Ed. I'd like a motion to move agenda item number 5, the Mayor of Hartford's FY27 budget, and allow him to be able to give his comments on that budget. And
David Biller, so moved.
thank you, David.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. All right.
Aye.
Thank you, Stephen. So today, regarding Hartford, we want to make everyone aware they are a Tier 4 municipality, and according to the statute, that the MARB has approval of certain budget line items, and this.
Kim, they're a tier 2.
I said Tier 2, didn't I?
I thought I heard 4.
You scared us
Oh.
with 4. Yeah.
You made
Yeah,
a mistake and said 4. My heart dropped.
Yeah.
I apologize. I swear,
Thank you. It's
what
okay.
came out of my mouth was 2. So I apologize on that. They are a Tier 2. They are not a Tier 4. So I think I just woke everybody up, right? You won't need a second cup of coffee. And we will be looking to approve some of their assumptions. I'm going to hand it over because I know that we have a time constraint from the mayor. So I usually would give an overview of the budget, but I will pass it over to you, Mayor and Julian.
Sure. Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the board members. I appreciate you accommodating me. But wanted to spend some time walking through our fiscal year 27 budget and primarily the assumptions that went into this budget. I will say, just as a starting point, obviously we are a week away from, or maybe less than a week away at this point, from the end of the legislative session, we will adopt our final budget on May 20th. I think that adoption will probably reflect some amendments to address funding issues within our board of ed, both at the state and within the city. I think Julian's asking to share the screen, so
Yeah.
we'll pull that up in a second.
Whenever you're ready, Mayor.
Yeah, go for it, Julian. So the proposed budget maintains our property tax rate. It's at 28.95 mils currently. It's something that we, given the affordability crisis that many of our residents are facing, was really important to us. And as you'll see, it took a lot of work to be able to hold that mill rate. At the same time, I think one of the things we will be discussing between now and May 20th is whether there's a necessity to move that mill rate to accommodate some of the financial needs of the Board of Education, given the current fiscal year, upcoming fiscal year deficit. Our spending increase is just over 1%. The vast majority of that is negotiated wage increases that have been, as you all know very well, long delayed, and wage increases for 17-16, which are some of our lowest paid employees, sanitation workers and park workers and folks within DPW that have really been struggling with wages that have stagnated for many years. And then for our firefighters, and you'll see that in a moment, but it was a pretty significant wage increase, but meant to address about a decade without wage increases for firefighters. And then it continues to invest in our capital assets with general fund contributions, although it contemplates as you all know very well, a modest bond issuance in the coming year. You can go to the next slide. There's some targeted investments, and these are really to address costs that have been previously contemplated, not new costs that we are considering in this budget, but the reopening of the Blue Hills Recreation Center has been planned for years, and that construction is finally coming to an end, and we need the staff to staff it as it reopens. And so that's something that has been contemplated for years, but is, coming due in this year. The fire department contract is probably the biggest increase in a budget item in our budget by a pretty substantial amount. But it was an increase that was really necessary to both to be competitive with other towns, but also, our fire department has not seen wage increases in about a decade, as I mentioned. Public Works, we've augmented over time, but really just a more accurate accounting of overtime that is currently taking place. And so it appears as more funding, but it's really just a more accurate accounting of the needs of the Public Works Department right now, and additional funding to address the impact of inflation. And then, as I've said once before, continuing to invest in capital assets with our general fund dollars. We can go through the overview. Let's jump a couple slides. So we'll get to this in a moment, but the grand list has remained relatively flat. There's been lower interest rates, which has led to a decrease in revenues. The intergovernmental expense line reflects the governor's proposed budget, and so there may be, as you've seen in the last few days, some changes there, but there's an increase in town aid, roads and pilot funding, but it is based on, again, the proposed budget at the beginning of this legislative session. The parking authority is seeing a net reduction in income to the general fund that is meant to account for some deferred maintenance on parking structures that are pretty significant, and dollars that need to be held back in order to address that deferred maintenance. And then we included a new revenue source from Medicaid service billing, and that's been part of a savings found from a study that we've done with a firm, Public Works, that has looked at sort of efficiencies within our government. You can go on to the next one. This is a snapshot at the grand list and the mill rate. Our tax collection rate is 95.67%. It has remained relatively high. We have included in this year and plan to have a tax lien sale in order to improve some of our collection rates and also move along some of the properties that have stagnated. We hope to have both an economic development and tax collection benefit from that. The next one. The state aid to the city, as I mentioned, is based on the governor's FY27 budget adjustments. There's some notes here on changes to ECS grants and aid, but this is a snapshot. I'm happy to spend more time on this, but for now I'll move on. To give you a summary of our expenses, the biggest increase has been the increase to payroll, as I mentioned at the start, with two major negotiated increases to 1716 and to our fire union. Those have both been unions that have seen in the years that we've been under MARB oversight pretty substantial stagnation in wages, and I think have been very necessary investments to make for our workforce and for those who serve the city of Hartford. It makes both of them somewhat more competitive with surrounding towns, and also, addresses, I think, a longstanding lack of investment in those wages. There's a reduction in benefits, which is driven significantly by attrition. And then it contemplates some debt service payments, but 2.5 million which is partially offset by a reduction in our CapEx contribution. And then a decrease in utilities driven by lower MDC cost and recess impact of the rising electricity rates. We've seen recent upgrades from both Moody's and S&P, probably most substantially in December. S&P gave the city an A- rating. It was a jump of 2 ratings for the city. Both have pointed pretty consistently to both the MARB oversight and the structure that has given the city, that the continued increases in unassigned fund balance, and the fact that the city in this budget meets for the first time our goal of a 7.5% value of our unassigned fund balance as a portion of our budget. I will say that I think this continued relationship with the MARB and the continued oversight has been helpful for the rating agencies as well as for our own financial structure. Obviously, there have been conversations that have been had publicly about the city drawing down substantially or even draining our unassigned fund balance to address Board of Ed deficits. I think that those conversations, though they were had publicly probably since the last time we were here, I think that there's a shared understanding between the Board of Ed and the city that it would be, untenable for the city to draw down on our rainy day fund to address one-time spending and one-time deficit, and the impact that would have on the city would be pretty disastrous. I think we've appreciated the collaborative conversations with the Board of Ed to get to a point of finding solutions that are sustainable and ongoing into the future that address the structural deficits there without drawing down on one-time reserves to get there. We wanted to show you the impact of the mill rate and the sort of stagnation of grand list growth over the last 5 years. The mill rate hasn't changed, and the grand list has remained flat. And at the time, during that same time, inflation has increased about 9.78%. So as you can all imagine, wages have gone up. In some cases, more than that, in order to address prior wages, lack of wage increases. The cost of electricity, the cost of utilities, the cost of materials have increased. It's something that you see across municipalities, but it has led to a substantial gap in revenue for the city of Hartford to address the expenditures that continue to rise. And so in order to make this budget work without a mill rate increase, there was both, a number of cuts that were made across city government, but we also freezed about half of our unfilled positions. We've frozen in order to make this proposed budget work, and it's been a difficult one to put together. And I just want to applaud Julian's effort to look through every nook and cranny of City Hall and try to find the dollars to make this work in this budget cycle. I'll quickly run through the larger components of the expenditure base. As this is something that, for those of you who are familiar with our numbers, is similar sort of pie chart to what you've seen before. 45% is in education, 24% is in payroll for the rest of city functions. We break that out, the components of the expenditure base that don't include education is on the next slide. Payroll continues to be the largest driver in increased expenditures, and one that we I think are working to, I'll try not to repeat myself too many times, address the wage stagnation that many of our labor units have seen over the last years, but as a result, we're going to continue to see an increase in payroll in the coming years, in the out years, and it's something we are planning for. And then in the benefits and insurance line, the largest of those is health insurance. I don't know if I mentioned that in my list of inflationary costs, but obviously health insurance continues to get more expensive at the city, and it's something that we continue to look at, whether there are exploring state partnership plan, exploring other options for the city to address the rising cost of health insurance and also the rising cost that our employees bear and their families bear from health insurance. We can go to the next one. You'll hear the in-depth look at our 5-year plan in a moment, but just at a high level, our long-term sustainability. We've spoken about this in the past in the setting, but increasing investment and growth in our city is the largest piece of that. Protecting and growing the tax base, I think of as part and parcel of this same. One of the things we are very intentionally looking at is our downtown commercial tax base, which is a substantial portion of our larger tax base. As you all know, in the years after COVID, as we've seen a decrease in in-office work in our downtown, the value of those properties has declined pretty substantially. And in order to address that, we're working together with the state on a full-scale plan to try to convert a number of buildings within our downtown, and we should have the results of that coming out within the next month. But to convert a number of our buildings within our downtown to sort of right-size the downtown to allow for sustained growth, but also to build housing that is so desperately needed in our city. We see this crisis as an opportunity to create thousands of additional units of housing in our downtown to make housing more affordable for our residents, but also build residential buildings appraised at a much higher value than commercial properties right now within our downtown. And we see it as an added benefit that we could sort of stabilize and grow our grand list over time by being able to address a number of these downtown buildings. We continue to stay disciplined in our spending, as you've seen from our budget, and continue to work to improve the quality of life for residents in our neighborhoods. We think our neighborhoods are an incredible source of potential for growth and economic development. And as we intentionally build more housing and more home ownership within our neighborhoods, as we stabilize the small business ecosystem within our neighborhoods, as we make investments in commercial corridors within neighborhoods that have failed to see those investments for many decades, we believe we'll be able to stabilize the economic vitality of our neighborhoods and the places in which most of our residents live, and then continuing to invest in critical infrastructure. I think we can move on. I'll conclude on our capital budget. This is I won't go item by item through this, but this is a breakdown of the places we're making investments, the largest of which is in flood control and drainage. We have a stormwater infrastructure that is in many cases over a century old and just has not been able to keep up with the number of 50-year and 100-year storms that we've seen in the last few years. And that's led to real damage for property owners, for small businesses, for residents in neighborhoods all across our city, and especially in North Hartford. And we continue to work with the state and with the federal government to try to find dollars to improve that infrastructure, and it's something we've made a priority in our own capital budget. With that, happy to take any questions.
Sorry, I was having difficulty getting the mouse over to get my mute off. Thank you, Mayor, for that highlight. Do you have a specific time that you have to roll off, just so that we understand that we might have a limited amount of questions? I know Julian will be able to help, but for your timeline for this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I should roll off in the next minute, but I'll stay a little longer, and I appreciate you guys accommodating me with this.
I don't have any immediate. I'm going to reach out to let the MARB members, if they have any immediate questions, to reach out. Don't hear any.
Well, Kim woke you all up at the beginning, and I think I put you back to sleep.
Sorry about that. And that honestly was a definite slip, because I will tell you that when I have notes that I read from, and it was it. So I'm going to go back and listen to the tape on this and say, maybe I didn't have enough coffee, because that is not what was in my head. I will say that. Not after all of this hard work. Julian's like, are you kidding me? I better come back to OPM and fix that.
It's the jolt we all needed in the morning.
Right.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Mayor, and I apologize for that slip.
And thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. If any more members do have questions, I know that Julian will be able to fill in. I know the mayor is leaving us and still in good hands with Julian here. I did not ask for the 5-year plan to be moved in the vote. I only asked for your budget to be moved, Mayor. And I know that the 5-year plan will help enlighten and allow us to see out into the future. But I think that we also have 1 hour until the superintendent and their CFO have to roll off as well. So let's shift over, and the next item on our agenda would be to go to the Board of Ed and hear their presentation. Are you okay with that also, Julian? Or do you need to move with the mayor, to go with the mayor?
No, please.
Okay.
Board of Ed should go next.
Thank you. All right. So I see that you got a presentation that you're going to put up. When the superintendent has provided in our packet today, oh, I'm getting an echo. Maybe we put everybody on mute just for a minute, and then I'll let them take over. I can see that we have a new presentation that was provided, and the last time we met, we did hear that the Board of Ed was planning a deficit for fiscal year 26 as well as 27. So we will be definitely interested in hearing where the budget is heading at this time. And I guess I will turn this over to the superintendent as well as their CFO for the Board.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Andre Townsend. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, ma'am, I can.
Thank you.
I got the green light? I'm good?
It's your floor.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Andre Townsend here, Superintendent and CEO of Hartford Public Schools, joined with our Chief Financial Officer, Caitlin Richard. I'm just going to set the frame, then I will pass the mic to my teammate, Caitlin Richard, our Chief Financial Officer, to go into a little more detail. Since October 2025, we've been sharing the exact same message. Hartford Public Schools are in a structural deficit. Fiscal year 26, at the time, about $22 million. Fiscal year 27, above $45 million. And. The reason why I say that and because while sharing this information, there's appeared to be, and I say this in good faith, a moving goalpost on the reasoning, what we should probably do, what needs to maybe happen. But truth was spoken from the very beginning to then until today. And we spoke truth to power, whereas now the information is on the right ears. My prayer in the past has been that the political winds blow in the favor of Hartford Public Schools based on the truth of the information that we have. And long story short, we've identified the reason for our deficit is because of the structure in which we receive our revenue. Not one report that was placed on my desk from the State Department of Education or the City of Hartford identify any level of mismanagement, any level of waste, any level of fraud. It shared that this deficit has been a structure, specifically through education cost share funding and money that is out of our control, money that go to Hartford resident students that are not a part of Hartford Public Schools. And we've identified that very clearly. I'm very excited to share that because we've been on message from day one. We've had local leaders and state leaders lean into the information to offer support of how they can help us with the structure. Bottom line, over the last 10 years, Hartford Public Schools cut $200 million and lost 600 jobs. Last 3 years alone, $70 million, 400 jobs. We cannot cut any more. If we want to have a great education system, we truly need help. And I plea in good faith for support and for help because the structure has hurt Hartford Public Schools. And as an educational leader, I cannot cut the bone. And I will not do that in good faith because that's not the good service that our families expect from us. And thankfully, again, those that have the power dynamics have leaned in, and I am optimistic that something will bounce in our favor to maintain where we are financially as far as not cutting, but also finding solution and opportunity as we move forward to address the structure. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will park my bus and pass the keys to our Chief Financial Officer, Caitlin Richards.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. I will echo some of what the superintendent shared in that we are optimistic. We've been very grateful to the collaboration with the city, which will lead to a potential contribution from the city to the BOE, but also just collaborating to go to the state level to our Hartford delegation to really articulate what some of these state level challenges are that we're facing. I'll name it's a funny time in that the state legislative session ends next Wednesday. So we don't have, clarity to share with you right now about these specific things that are going to be coming from the state, but we do feel very optimistic that there is going to be additional support in a variety of forms, including ECS, to help us make it through. And I think so much of that is because of the conversations we've been having about the structure to truly understand what's going on. So what I'm going to present on, there's going to be just some upfront framing, some context to set the scene, and then we'll get into the specifics of our budget. I will name it as our itemized list of expenditures. What that means is this is what we believe we need to run the school district. And then I'll talk through some of the levers that we have been exploring on the state and city side to be able to match that need. I think the one other piece I will just add is I know it was shared between our last meeting and now by the State Department of Education that they believed, based on some analysis, we might have a surplus. The results are, they had a team of auditors come that I spent time with. The results of that are not out yet, but I will say I am confident that we have a deficit. And I think we have continued to focus our energy on better understanding that and what it'll take to get us to a place of sustainability. The last piece I'll share is this is focused on next year. We will be building a 5-year plan, but that's going to be in conjunction with CSDE and others. So part of the work that they've been doing with us was to look at some of those projections for the current fiscal year. The next set of work is going to be looking out. And I think it's more important than ever that we all have a shared understanding, shared set of assumptions, as we're looking at that data so that we can have really clear messages to the public about the nature of the challenge that we're facing, and just for our own internal work with each other. So you will see that coming soon as we continue to align with CSDE on some of those numbers. And, just acknowledging that 5-year plan, a lot of it is going to look like structural changes that need to happen. And we feel optimistic about, the governor saying there needs to be a study on ECS and special education, on the study CSDE is doing on Sheff versus O'Neill, and on the tuition, special ed tuition rate setting meant to happen. So I really think the next legislative session is a time to really address a lot of this. And what we're looking to do for the next year is make steps towards that, and make it through the year without having to make significant cuts and cut the bone. That's the overall framing. I'm going to get into some of the slides here. I promise I'll be efficient. I know that we are on a time clock, but I do want to set the scene a bit just to help explain why we're in this situation. So I'm going to do some context, then we'll get into the details of our budget proposal. You also received a copy of the proposal itself, the line by line, school by school, department by department. This will be the overview of that, and then we'll talk about what's coming next. So I actually wanted to start with some national level data just to situate ourselves and Connecticut in that conversation. The Education Law Center recently came out with a report that ranked states by their level of progressiveness or regressiveness when it comes to the difference in funding for high and low poverty districts. So progressive districts are up top. Utah's actually the most progressive, where there's the biggest difference where high poverty districts get significantly more funding than low poverty districts. What you can see on this chart is Connecticut is very last out of the entire nation in terms of having a regressive school funding system. So while Connecticut has high per pupil funding, the difference between what a high poverty district receives and a low poverty district is actually the biggest difference in the nation, in a negative way. So you see high poverty districts receiving significantly less funding than low poverty districts. So I just wanted to situate that. We know that Hartford is the highest poverty community in Connecticut. And so some of the tension that we are facing is driven by this dynamic of the state level funding system and inequity there. The one other national data I wanted to share is on special education expenditures. So this is not all states, it's about half of them, but what you can see is it's showing what is the per pupil cost of special education by state. You can see Connecticut's also at the far end of this spectrum with the highest special education cost per pupil, and notably the highest share of that is borne by the local district. And so because there is not a weight in the state funding formula for special education, Connecticut's one of 2 states that doesn't have one, you see this dynamic where a district like Hartford is lower funded in the context of Connecticut and is having to pay a high percentage of the special education costs. And so this, when we talk about, special education is a challenge, when we talk about kind of the equity in funding, this is what we mean. And I think it helps just to show that this really is an outlier nationally and where we need to focus our attention to be able to make funding sustainable, not just for Hartford, but for the entire state. Turning now to some of our budget, this is just a high-level view, and a really important point that so much of our budget is tuition and transportation for students who do not attend our schools. And so we've talked about this, that there are Hartford resident students who attend non-Hartford magnet schools, open choice schools. That is all through the Sheff versus O'Neill agreement, but also charter schools and private special education placements. And at this point in the budget for next year, it's about 30% of our entire budget is tuition and specialized transportation for students who don't attend our schools. And that leaves us with this increasingly smaller percentage of our funding that is dedicated to the schools that we are running and that we're educating students in. And this is the core tension of what we are facing and why we are in this situation. I'm not going to go line by line on tuition. I know we've shared some of the detailed data, but I did just want to highlight that this is FY25 data on tuition. Total tuition was about $115 million out of about a $450 million budget. General education tuition, which is what we pay to CREC, is the smallest portion of that. The larger portion, almost $100 million, is special education tuition. We pay this to CREC. We pay this to open choice schools, and we pay it when we privately place students in special education facilities. And this is a really, really big burden on our budget. We want to make sure, of course, that special education students are getting served, but in how the system is set up now, specifically the fact that there are not rates for special education tuition, and we are charged different rates by all of these different providers, it makes it a huge part of our budget and incredibly unpredictable. I will also say there is a dynamic where open choice schools, so when a Hartford student goes to a suburban school, that school can then choose to outplace that student, and then we bear the cost of that outplacement, which is about $115,000 per student. And if you compare that to, the 11,525, which is the base ECS, there's just this massive difference between the funding we have coming in to support special education students and the money going out, especially when those students are not attending our schools. And this is one of the biggest increases in costs every year, where decreases have had to be made in order to fund this. I also wanted to share some transportation data. So this is based on the budget for next year. So our projection of transportation spend, we're up to about $40 million in transportation costs projected for next year. But I really want to highlight that only 7 million of that is what we call regular transportation. So those are those big yellow school buses you see taking students from a bus stop to school. 32 million of that is curb-to-curb transportation, which is the specialized transportation for students who have that written into their individualized education plan, and are taken from their door to the school's door. So it is a large amount of money, $32 million just on that type of transportation. So we've been as efficient as we can be with the regular transportation, but that area of specialized transportation is one that is a big cost share. And when you look at the right pie chart, what that shows is breaking down transportation by where students are going to school. And you can see that about 15 million of that 40 million budget is students going to Hartford Public Schools. So that's inclusive of the regular transportation and curb to curb for students attending our schools. 7 million is for students who don't attend our schools. They either go to CREC or open choice or charter schools. And that is because the state pays for regular transportation for choice schools, but not for the specialized transportation. So we are providing that at about $7 million a year. And then 17 million of it is students going to those private placements. And so actually the total amount for private placements is bigger than the total amount for every single Hartford public school. And that's actually about 300 students. So there is just this disproportionate cost for a smaller set of students for special education. And as I said, we absolutely want to meet the needs of students, but the way in which this is funded is unsustainable. And it requires making trade-offs then to other services to students. And this is just a very simple statement, but is the crux of the challenge. We are both paying for students who choose to leave the system, and we are paying for those who choose to stay. So Hartford Public Schools is funding multiple systems at one time, and that is what is putting a lot of pressure on our budget. And I do want to talk a little bit on the enrollment front, because the other dynamic of this is that we have been losing enrollment over time. Part of that is families leaving the city of Hartford based on our analysis that we shared in the fall. Part of it is students making different choices about where to go to school. But out of all of that, we had about 1,300 fewer students this year compared to last year. And one of the challenges with that is that as enrollment goes down, our cost structure does not go down to the same degree. And this piece I do want to address directly because I think we get this question a lot. We've been talking about it with the Hartford delegation. The issue is that when students are leaving, they're leaving from many different schools at one time. And it may not be enough students at one particular school in one particular grade level to not need that classroom teacher. Because if you think of it, if one student leaves, there's no change to our cost structure, but we are then paying tuition for that student and maintaining everything that we had before. And so schools often need a similar number of resources, even when enrollment goes down. And what you'll see in our budget proposal is we are proposing some cuts based on enrollment decline. It's about 41 classroom teachers that we no longer need next year because our enrollment has gone down. But that 41 teachers is not enough to fix the entire deficit. And so we're doing what we can to be as efficient as possible, but there just isn't this commensurate decrease in costs when students leave the system. And that's really the challenge we have, because then we're both funding the system we had already and funding the students' tuition when they are going somewhere else. As the superintendent said, and we've shared this slide, I just want to make the point that because costs don't automatically go down, Hartford has made really tough decisions to make cuts. That's where you see that over 600 positions in the last decade, $200 million, with about $70 million in the past 3 years. And when we say we're cutting to bone, that's what we mean. When I came into the district last year, it was very hard to find anything that felt extra. All of our schools have worked incredibly hard on their budgets, getting down to as efficient as possible, to the bare bones, to the class size maximums, to the bare minimum of what they need. And there just really isn't an opportunity to make these major cuts anymore and still be able to run the school system. And so now pivoting to the plan for next year, all of this is why we have focused this budget season on specific legislative advocacy to change the conditions in which we are operating. As I mentioned, we are making some cuts. I will speak to those in a minute for 2 reasons. One is enrollment decline. So all of our staffing works based on formulas. Number of students leads to a certain number of teachers based on our class size maximums. So that does mean with fewer kids, there are fewer teachers. We also have some grants that have expenses associated with them that as the grant is expiring, we are also getting rid of those expenses. So this is just part of strong financial management. It is something we would be doing regardless of the major deficit that we're in. And we have had to explain to our community, we're not making broad scale cuts, but we are making cuts when it comes to enrollment decline and grants that we no longer have access to. As mentioned, this deficit is driven by those structural issues with special education, tuition, and transportation. We have a deficit in the current year. As I mentioned, we are actively working with CSDE to come to a firm number on that projection and get additional state support for that. That is ongoing. I can't say much more about it yet. I think that's going to be happening quite soon. And then the second piece is the deficit that we've had for next year. That baseline forecast is about $52.5 million. And I will speak to that number plus some of the investments we are asking to make specifically in special education. So I'm going to turn now to our budget. This is, again, you have the full budget that has the summary information and the detailed information, but I'm going to hit the main points. I'm going to start with revenue, and what you see in the top bar is our proposed revenue from last year. What you see in the bottom bar is our proposed revenue for next year. What I will say, and in all of this for revenue and expense, we are comparing what we projected last year at this time, so the proposed budget, to what we are now projecting. So there are dynamics that have happened over the course of this year that we are now accounting for in this budget. So I will speak to the ways in which that shows up, but some of these things are things that, we've known during this fiscal year about changes to our revenue, changes to our expenses that we've now incorporated for next year. The main takeaway on revenue is you see about a $16 million difference between last year's proposed budget and this year's. That is all in state and federal grants. And I'm going to get into the details on this slide. So one big piece of the federal grant difference you see from last year to next year, or the current year to next year, is on carryover funds. So historically, Hartford has carried over funds specifically in the title grants. They allow you to bring a percentage from one fiscal year to the next. We are exhausting all of those funds this year. That is for 2 reasons. One is we have a deficit in the current year and need to use all sources of funding. And 2, it's just part of strong grants management that we've been working on with CSDE to spend our grant funds in the year in which they are allocated. So you will see a difference on the lines of carryover funds for that reason. We are trying to get to a place where we actually don't have carryover funds moving forward. We're exhausting the funding in the year that it is assigned to. There's also some grants that are ending at the federal level. The North Hartford Ascends Pipeline Grant was a major federal grant we've had access to for the past few years. It ends the calendar year grant, so it ends in December. And as of now, we are planning to not continue the expenses associated with that grant. It's supporting schools in North Hartford with community models. So they have some staff members that work on community partnerships, some community-based organizations to provide after-school programming. We are advocating and making plans to try to get an extension on that grant, as it's been a way to provide a lot of programming we wouldn't elsewise. But as of now, that grant sunsets at the end of December. We are projecting a slight decrease in title grants just due to enrollment decline. So those grants flow through the State Department of Education. They go based on enrollment, and we are expecting some decreases based on our declined enrollment. We had a situation with the Full Service Community Schools grant. This is a federal grant that the federal government discontinued. The state is now going to be picking it up, but we're waiting for more information on that front, so it's not included at this time. In terms of state grants, the biggest change here is actually matching actuals for FY26. So you may recall that one of the drivers for our deficit in the current year is shifts from projected to actuals, specifically around the Alliance grant. There was an initial projection at the state level that included data from a prior fiscal year where we had higher enrollment. When we got the actual numbers, it was about $3 or $4 million lower. So that is part of what's contributing to our deficit this year. We've now corrected that in the projections for next year. Similarly, around the seed grant, we had projected 5 million. It's closer to 3.4. So a lot of this is actually right sizing to ensure that we are matching our best understanding of those grant funds. And then similar to the federal level, there's just some grants discontinuing. I won't go into all of them, but there's specific state grants associated with things like health, social workers that just no longer exist next year. They might have been a 3-year grant that is ending. So that is on the state front. It largely is matching to actuals from this year. And then there's a set of grants that this was FY26 was their last year. You will also see that we had initially in the budget last year assumed one-time funding from the city. This budget assumes no one-time funding. So the reason you're going to see a big gap between revenue and expense is we have made no assumptions about getting any additional funding from the city or the state. What we have used this to say is here's the revenue we know. Our best understanding is we will get this revenue. Here is what we need to operate the school district. And the difference between those two numbers is what we have asked for at the state and city level. I'm going to flip now to the expense side. So similar logic here. You see on the left what our proposed budget was last year to what it is going to be moving forward on the right. I did just want to make the point that if you look at our budget, the blue, red, and green is all personnel. So certified, non-certified, and benefits. That's about a little over half the budget. And then you see tuition, transportation, and utilities is essentially the rest of it. We have a little bit of non-salary expenses here and there, but that tuition, transportation, and utilities is what we call our non-discretionary spend. And you can see it's just taking up a massive portion of our budget. So in a lot of cases, a school district budget typically is about 85% salaries and benefits. So that's true nationally. It's often that is the biggest driver of expense. And it's just really notable that for us, that is not true because such a big proportion of it is that non-discretionary expense and why it's difficult at this point to make further cuts. When we get into the expenses, you see a large increase between last year's proposed budget and this year of about 44 million. And I'm going to, similarly with revenue, I'm going to talk through what those changes are. So you see on the salary front, there's a big increase here. The reason for that is multifold. One is an update to the vacancy assumption. This is something we've talked about in our current year budget. You know, we had 13% vacancies last year. We estimated 6 for this year. We were closer to 3, and that is a driver of the deficit that we are now facing. We have had conversations about this and really thinking through the fact that as a school district, if there are teachers to hire, if there are special education staff, we're in a position where we have to hire them. So we've made a much more conservative vacancy rate assumption of about 2.5%, so slightly lower than what we're experiencing right now, to be more conservative and accurate with the dynamics that we're facing. I will say we're thrilled. We are filling vacancies. That is new. This is a lower vacancy rate than even before COVID for Hartford Public Schools. We attribute a lot of that to some of the contractual salary increases, especially for teachers. And that's the other piece. So in that salary, so there's an update just to that vacancy assumption to be more conservative. It also includes our contractual salary increases, the biggest of which is for teachers. And then you'll see there's a proposed increase, and these are the two investments we're asking for. One is for more in-house special education staff. This actually came out of a lot of conversations we've had with you all about investing in our own special ed programming. We are also asking for what is called elementary resource or literacy interventionist teachers. So it's teachers who focus specifically on literacy with small groups of students. It's actually required in state statute for alliance districts. We have not been able to afford it for all schools, and so we're making an ask to be compliant with that statute. So you'll see that increase for salaries. I will note it doesn't necessarily represent a major increase from our actuals. It is a big increase from that proposed budget because of that vacancy assumption. Benefits then flow, they're a percentage of salary, so you will see a commensurate increase in benefits. And of course, we just, as everyone else, are predicting rising costs of health insurance. As a reminder, we are self-insured. We work with consultants to support us in doing those projections, and we use that information to incorporate into the budget. You will then see about a $10 million increase for tuition. That is located both in the tuition line, and also some of it is in the professional services line if you are looking at our budget book. That's just because there's a group of tuition for our students over 18 that falls into that code. But when you add it together, it's about a $10 million increase. This is an 8% increase in tuition. That's the trend that we have been seeing. And just want to emphasize that this is where the rate setting around tuition would very much help our budget. This brings tuition to about $130 million out of our budget. And again, is that area that is eating up a lot of our resources. Transportation, as I shared, is also seeing an increase driven partly by the contractual rates we have with our transportation provider. But in addition, just those curb-to-curb transportation needs are increasing. So those are the biggest areas of increase from the proposed budget for 26 to the proposed budget for 27. What this means at the end of the day is revenue is about 436 million, expenses is 496 million, which is a gap of 60 million. And the way to break that down is it's that initial baseline projection, the 52.5 million, and we're asking for two increases. One is 5 million for in-house special ed programming. I'll talk about that more on the next slide. And the second is what I mentioned about those literacy interventionists. You will see that budget book we shared with the detail does not have the literacy interventionist in it. So you'll see a number closer to 493.3. The only change from that budget book to what we're sharing here is those 3 million in elementary literacy interventionists, based again on that state statute for alliance districts. I'm going to share just briefly what this means in terms of FTE changes, emphasizing the most important points. The top rows here, we have what we call central cost centers, so positions that live in a department versus school cost centers. But a lot of times those ones that are in central cost centers live at schools. It's just where we code the positions. So in the first row, it's actually just a change in coding. We have some school counselors that were in school budgets. We've moved them to a central cost center. It's easier to keep track of them. But the real increase there you'll see is a proposal to increase special education paraprofessional positions, a little over 50 of them, to support with our special education programming. So the biggest increase that is aligned with that increase for the in-house special ed programming is for paras. You'll then see in the school cost centers for general education positions, there's about 41 fewer elementary and secondary teachers based on enrollment decline. And so this is something, like I said, we've had to talk with the community about. There are still going to be some losses in positions due to enrollment. Also in that piece is that request for those elementary literacy interventionists. It would be at every elementary school, so 23 of them. You then see in the non-gen ed teacher positions, so they live at school sites, there's also a decrease. Some of that is the coding up to the top row, but some of it is just the decrease that schools are facing in their supplemental funds. Title I is their biggest pool of dollars. They are facing both decreases in that due to enrollment, and as salaries increase, they essentially have less purchasing power with those dollars. So fewer overall positions that schools have been able to purchase in their supplemental funding. And finally, when it comes to, we have positions that the district allocates directly to schools based on student need. We are proposing to increase the number of special education teachers and social workers for that in-house special ed programming. And then there's just a reflection of a few positions not captured last year. So overall, the big things to know is we're asking for special ed paras, special ed teachers and social workers for in-house programming. We are decreasing positions based on enrollment decline and grant availability, and then asking to add those literacy interventionists. Few more slides here. Just wanted to touch on the special ed programming piece. We've really appreciated the conversations with you all about this. We view this as an investment that could lead to long-run savings and just a better experience for students. I'll name two. We've had a lot of community budget forums, and this is the thing that comes up almost more than anything else, is parents wanting us to improve the special ed services that exist within the district. So a lot of factors have aligned to be essentially something everyone is saying, that we want to strengthen our own special ed programming. As I shared previously, it's over $100,000 per student when they are outplaced, and that's the cost of a teacher. So one student is costing the equivalent of a teacher, and we do believe that in the long term, we will find savings by offering more programming in Hartford. I mean, there will be a competitive grant starting next year that we can apply for to support some of this. And we plan to. We've gotten a lot of support from the Hartford delegation for Hartford specifically to be pursuing that. And so just to sum it up, I'm going to say the things that we're doing, then I'm going to say what we're asking for. What we're focused on is, as I said, changing the financial conditions in which we operate, doing the education around the system, the advocacy, the collaboration with our city partners and our delegation. We're also trying to do our best to have strong fiscal management. We're decreasing positions based on enrollment decline and one-time grant funds. We are also working, and this is part of, you'll see it in the city's 5-year plan, that there's mitigation measures we're collaborating with the city on. Ideas like, should we go out to RFP for transportation specifically for that specialized transportation? Could we offer incentives to parents to bring their kids to school? So we really, Julian says he meets with me too much, but we have been collaborating on, figuring out ideas for how we can coordinate with each other. What are some mitigation measures? I will say those alone are not going to solve this problem, but they're absolutely things that we can pursue. And like I said, we want to invest in special education. We think that that is a short-term investment with a long-term impact. What we are asking for, and as I said, this is a funny time. There's a week left in the legislative session. I don't have specific numbers for you, but these are the areas that we've been focused on in talking with our delegation. There is the adjustment to the ECS. You probably have seen that in the news, that is one of the biggest things that is going to come out of this legislative session. The governor has named it's important and named that Hartford specifically is going to need more funding in this area. We have also been advocating around funding for special education and rate setting. We understand the rate setting is going to be something happening in the next legislative session, but have been looking, for opportunities, at least for tuition relief in the interim. We've also been talking about this dynamic with the school choice system and special education, highlighting the cost of that specialized transportation and the gap we face in the revenue we collect for open choice students, which is only half the ECS, and then what we pay in tuition. So these are all the conversations we've been having with our state level delegation. I think what it's looking like is some of these starting to happen, especially around ECS, which is sustainable funding moving forward and would increase every year. And then potentially some bridge funding to help us get through to next year's legislative session, when I think a lot of this structural stuff can start to be addressed. And as mentioned, we are looking for an increased investment from the city, essentially to make up the difference in what we're able to get at the state level. We've been collaborating directly with them and appreciate their commitment to supporting us moving forward. And so I'm sorry I don't have more details on these fronts. I think truly in the next couple of days, more of this is going to become clear to us and to everyone, but we are feeling optimistic based on some of the conversations we've been having. And that concludes this presentation. As I said, the state legislative session ends next week. We'll have more information then the city will vote on their budget at the end of May. We will then do our final vote on the budget, which will be when the expenses are aligned to the revenue, once we have a better understanding of that revenue picture. So I will stop there and open it up.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was a lot. A lot to digest, and I'm sure, like going into a classroom, you only remember 1/3 of it, so we'll probably be listening to this tape again. One question that I have for you is, and I know this is to come up later on, but since we are talking about the Board of Ed at this time, is that you do have a number of contracts that are in negotiation, and some of them have been negotiated. And so can you please comment on a little bit of the fiscal year 26 contracts that are coming up. Some are in negotiation, some are not started as of yet. And then you do have two of them, that one being a little more substantial than the other, on the local 566, the custodians, and that's in negotiation, but that is a large pool. And that would be that contract expired in 2025, as well as Local 1018, which also expired in 2025, which I'm assuming, we can always assume that when those close, there might be a retro. So I'll just throw that to you.
Yep, that's correct. So Local 566, we've been in negotiation. We are planning to ratify at the May board meeting. And yes, so there is some element of potential retro there. And I don't want to get too into the details just because we haven't closed that yet, but it is something we've accounted for in the budget moving forward for next year is that percentage increase that we're anticipating based off of that. And I think that is the biggest one that we're currently in negotiation with and about to close. We are still actively in negotiations with the health professionals, with the buildings and grounds supervisors. That one only has 7 people in it, so it's kind of a smaller piece. And then with our child development associates, so that's the early childhood. So those are still ongoing. The closest one to being finished is the 566, but for all of those, we've made estimates of percentage increases that we have built into the budget for next year.
Even for the ones that are not in negotiation?
Correct. Where the ones not in, yes, correct.
Okay,
yeah.
I just want to make sure, should that come through, that it's not a big surprise for later on. Okay, thank you. Any of the board members would like to, I don't see any hands up as of yet. Questions? And I'm going to be cautious of the time for you. Yes, Lisa. Oh, wait, one. Kevin.
Oh, Lisa can go before me. I'm still formulating my thoughts.
Okay, but yours came up first, but I noticed hers, so I apologize. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Kevin. I just wanted to say congratulations on elevating the structural issues that your district faces. You are very uniquely impacted from choices that were made by the General Assembly for years with how public school students are funded, and specifically magnet school students are funded. So I'm happy that that topic has elevated to the point where conversations are being had on how to address it for Hartford Public Schools, because it's simply unsustainable for your students. I also wanted to thank you for breaking out your transportation costs. I had not seen that broken out in that manner. And I know that transportation contracts are difficult for school districts because it's inclusive of all of the students. But I appreciated seeing just how large of a portion is for those door-to-door transports. But I also wanted to ask, declining enrollment is a thing for Hartford Public Schools, but it's also a thing for all school districts across the state of Connecticut, or I would say a majority of school districts across the state of Connecticut. And it's certainly important to reduce positions when you have a reduction in the number of students in your classrooms. But I'm also questioning whether or not you guys have looked at where your class sizes compare as compared to other districts. And I have it in my brain, and I don't know if this is true, but I do know that, like, after having conversations with the Bridgeport superintendent, for example, they have very large class sizes. And I would hate to see, like, Bridgeport Public Schools with declining enrollment reduce teachers and keep those class sizes at that level instead of just reducing the class sizes, because Bridgeport and Hartford has a very high need population. That would certainly benefit from reduced class sizes. So I just wanted to ask about your class sizes and whether or not you've looked at how you compare to other districts, and not just urban districts, but suburban districts as well.
We have not done a comparative analysis, and now I want to, so thanks for suggesting that. It's about 23 students in the early elementary grades, and then up to 27 in the upper elementary, and then 28 in secondary. And so that is part of our teacher contract. Those are the maximums. But it's a good point. I would love to know, for example, Bridgeport, but just other districts. That's something we could look into, because those are the rates we have right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Superintendent.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you. And it's always a good idea for Lisa to go before me because she says exactly what I wanted to say. And thank you, Caitlin, for both the presentation, raising the issue and explaining so clearly the structural problems, as well as that transportation budget. I thought was very interesting. I think the strange place that we're in for the MARB at this moment is the State Department of Ed letter, which I can't really make heads or tails of. And I know that you're still in the process. So maybe it's for a future meeting. But that's just struck me as I don't really know what to do with that as we're having this conversation. The other things are that my concern is with the state budget that I don't know what numbers are going to end up going to Hartford. The numbers for New Haven looked like it was going to be around 20 million in total between both education and municipal funding. So my concern is that it is very likely, I would guess, that the actual dollar amount that the state chips in to the entire city of Hartford is lower than that 60 million. So even with the money that would go to the city, there is not a clear avenue to make up that difference. So I don't know if you've thought yet about what that will look like if that is the case, but I unfortunately, and you know that I would like it to be that number and much higher from the state, but if it is not, there are going to be decisions about cuts. And do you have a sense of where that would be sort of concentrated?
I can answer, and then Dr. Townsell, if you want to jump in. I will say on the CSD letter, I have spent time with the auditors. It was actually very helpful to have another set of eyes on our projection. I think all of this is complicated. And what I will say is I am confident based on the process I went through with them that we have a deficit. And that I'm not going to share more than that because I think more will be shared publicly. But I was also confused by that letter. I think it was unfortunate it was shared publicly without ever speaking to us first. And I think that, we've done a lot of work to build the understanding of the challenge that we're facing. And in some ways it, disrupted the conversation a bit from focusing on what the solutions are, but we've kind of maintained that focus. But yes, more will come out soon. But I will say from that, I'm confident it is a deficit. And so I'm glad we're at least getting to a shared understanding on that front. On the second front, I will say I totally understand your concern. We literally are meeting today about some of this as things are being finalized to see how close we can get to that 60 million between the state and then also the city contribution. We have not made a plan of specific things to cut if it doesn't happen, because it is almost impossible to find what that would be. So we have been focused on this piece around kind of making the point that we need to be supported in this way to continue. And then waiting essentially to see, it's going to happen in the next couple of days at the state level, what happens with the city to then move into the next phase if we had to. But I know Dr. Townsell, if you would want to add to that.
Yeah, I want to add, well, thank you for that, Mr. Alvarez. Let me just first share, whatever that letter was that talked about a surplus, I hope that does not get swept under the rug, because that was a big problem for Hartford Public Schools when that came up, because that questioned our credibility. We've been saying, number one, our deficit has been forecast years prior to myself coming here and also our chief financial officer. And now that we're here saying help, 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 a report comes to the State Board of Education saying, no, surplus. Someone needs to answer that, because that is a problem. That became front page of the Hartford Courant. I'm answering questions about that in front of news crews. For what and for why? So that must be addressed. And my prayer is that the Municipal Accountability Review Board can get those answers, because that completely threw a wrench in what we were trying to do to support young people in Hartford Public Schools. And the second thing I would share is, in good faith, as a superintendent, a chief education officer of Hartford Public Schools, I cannot make a cut. We should not have to choose between a school safety officer and a behavior technician, something that's standard in another district. So when people are saying, well, what's the plan to cut? The plan to cut, I'm saying we're only in a deficit because of the structure, not bad behavior or mismanagement or irresponsible reallocation of resources. It's because how we're set up. So to ask me to cut is in bad faith or shows a lack of understanding. We have to educate our kids. This is Hartford Public School, the capital city. And we're saying, cut what? The 600 jobs that we lost in 10 years or the 400 in the last 3, that's not enough cuts. So I'm telling you, I'm cutting bone. Which bone do you want me to cut? The forearm or the calf? Tell me where to cut. The thigh? I can't do that. That's not fair for our families, not fair for our kids. So when we say we need help, the question is, why is our voice not trusted? We have terminal degrees, doctorate in education, probably the best CFO in all of New England, if not the country of America. And we're saying what we need. The question is, where's the trust? Where is the trust in our voice? Why are we still being questioned? And I'm saying this in good faith, not to any person here, but what I'm sharing is that is a concern. Deficit, and then someone throws something at the state board of education level and say, no, surplus. Man, someone needs to be questioned about that. That's not right, and that's wrong. And if it's a mistake, say, hey, look, we made a mistake, own it so we can move on from it. Let's not sweep that under the rug. And I do say that in good faith. So I'll park my bus on that and happy to respond to anything else.
Yeah, I don't necessarily need a response to this. I think with the State Department of Ed letter, the reason I'm not saying more is I don't know what happened there. I'm curious the results of that. And I think I would share outrage if it was inaccurate. I think to the broader point, and I would emphasize, I don't know if there are many people that agree more that it is outrageous, these structural problems. But I also recognize the reality that they exist, and that if the state does not, as we are going to find out next week, completely solve this problem, which they're not going to completely solve this problem, but they might for 1 year do enough to cover $60 million. But there is also the very real possibility that they don't cover $60 million. And I don't want you to have to cut, but at the end of the day, for this board, we can't approve a budget that is running a massive deficit. And so that's the only thing that I am suggesting is, there is just a simple plain reality. Whatever I like or dislike about that reality is we'll see what the state does. We will see what the city does. But there is a reality that also the mayor saying they are not going to drain their fund balance, which I agree the city should not drain its fund balance for a single year of expenses. There's just something there that is needs to be part of the conversation should that $60 million not be made up. So that was my only point there.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
I want to piggyback off of Kevin's comment, and my comment is coming from someone who has taken a distressed nonprofit out of distress, and in doing so, and I'm going to call the Board of Education in distress as you're looking at multi-year deficits. And in order to do that, as you're talking about cut and bone, not cut and bone, and you are looking for support along the way, I have been put into the similar position where you built a contingency plan. And what is the contingency plan based on levels? So here's the highest level. Okay, what's my top 20% if I do not get all of the funding that I'm looking for? You're looking for $60 million is your ask. What if you get 40? What are you going to do? What if I get 20? What am I going to do? You know what I mean? And what if I get nothing? What am I going to do? Because you do have a responsibility to have a balanced budget. Now, whether you keep that in your back pocket or whether you don't keep that in your back pocket, I understand what your drive is, but it would not be, you do need to look at the situation at hand. And if you're not able to get all of the funding that you are asking. So I would suggest that you begin to prepare for that, whether you're preparing for that on the 7th or not, that you do begin to take a look at that, because you are looking at, you're looking for support from more than one political entity, let's just say, the city as well as the state.
Yes, and just to be clear, we totally agree. And the plan is we will end with a balanced budget at the end of this process. And so, yes.
Very good. Any other questions for the Board of Ed. I do think that we are in transition. We're listening to your messages. If someone was to ask me today, what's before us is the FY27 budget from the city, which then includes the Board of Ed side of it. That report did not include any additional funds for the city for the Board of Ed at this time is in that budget. I know we'll look at the 5-year plan from the city side. I am not in a position because I think that we are still in an unsettled territory to take any kind of action on an FY27 budget. And I am willing to listen to the Julian's presentation on the 5-year plan as well. I only know your 5-year plan from the Board of Ed, which was the prior one. Yours is not being produced yet. So I think that we're right now in a little bit of a difficult situation. And I do see Mr. Biller's hand up. Thank you.
So first, I want to thank the city for a wonderfully comprehensive presentation to us today. Done a great job. Things certainly seem to be moving in the right direction. I would echo comments that Lisa, Kevin, and Kimberly made far more eloquently than I could. And what I can tell you is I think that there's, for me, too many blank spaces right now that it sounds like are going to be filled in just in a matter of the next few days. And what I would say is to the extent that we're going to be asked to approve anything today, I think my comment would be that this is something that would be more appropriately put before the full MARB at our next full meeting. I know that I always benefit from the questions and comments of my fellow board members, and I just want to make sure that the ask is given the due consideration it deserves. So when that comes up, to the extent that a motion would be required to push this over to the full MARB, that would be a motion that I would make.
Any other comments? And we're only down to 6 minutes, and we do have to let the superintendent and Caitlin leave. No other comments? Okay. I will tell you on the agenda today for the 5-year plan, it was noted that it was not noted to take any action on that plan because we did know that it was incomplete. But Julian, does anybody else have comments for the Board of Ed?
Kim?
Yes.
Do you want the Board of Ed to comment on agenda item 4? They're working with the Connecticut State Department of Education update.
I think we heard that, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's the update, is that they've been working to come to a shared understanding of our projections, and we're going to continue that work. Yep. And
I was very surprised to hear that you already had the auditors, boots on the ground. So that's really good to hear. Do you have one more question concerning that? Thank you, John Mayer, for speaking up. Did they have a deadline for the time that they were going to complete the report, the auditors?
I heard today.
No?
They told me today was going to be completed for FY26. They then are going to move into future phases. But I was told that they worked with me all of last week. And so we got our part done, and then it was supposed to be completed by today.
Oh, wow. Okay. And what audit firm is that? I thought I heard it was CLA.
It was CLA,
Larson and Allen. Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one final question. So SDE a number of months ago, or the State Board of Education, did an analysis looking at how much Hartford Public Schools spends per pupil in their magnet schools and compared that to Crack and Goodwin University magnet schools. That analysis showed that Hartford Public Schools spends significantly less than the other operators. And then there was a conversation about them developing legislative proposals on how to adjust that, because Hartford magnet schools need to be magnetic, is the term that they use, to attract students in. And then I didn't hear anything else. So I'm wondering, did you hear any further analysis or conversation about how to kind of right size your funding so that you are spending comparable to those other operators?
That's been completely dropped, honestly, because the initial analysis was showing that we spent less on our magnet schools than Craig or Goodwin. We made the point that, we're allocating our resources across neighborhood and magnet schools where it's a similar formula. There's grant funds on top of it that lead to a difference, right, between neighborhood and magnet. Neighborhood schools are high need. We then pointed out that our magnet schools are actually funded through the state magnet operating grant partially. And so if there's a discrepancy between what we're getting and what Craig is getting, because they're funded in a very different way, that's actually a state level issue, right? That there maybe needs to be a change in how our magnet schools are funded. And I heard a similar thing of, oh, yes, we need to work on legislation related to funding. I think maybe that's for the next legislative session. Hopefully it's part of the chef study that they're doing with Northwest Education to figure some of that out. But I'll say I haven't heard any more than what you've heard on that front. It has not come back up.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Yep.
All right. I think that we will let you leave. I don't see any more hands up, and good luck with your meeting. And we will look to talk to you more in depth at the MARB meeting on May 14th. And that's in person at the LOB, at the Legislative Office Building. Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm losing my place, so I want to make sure I bring everything back. I think the next item on our agenda is, Julian, if you want to give us a highlight on the city's 5-year plan.
Yes, of course. Happy to do that. And
do you have a presentation?
Yeah, I'm going to share screen. I'm done fumbling with buttons. And this is a pretty brief overview of the 5-year plan. And if you had an opportunity to read the narrative of the document that we sent along to you, I think you could probably pick up on the fact that it was a little difficult to finesse some of this just because of how much is still in play at this point with respect to the Board of Ed budget, state funding, where we will land in terms of the city's contribution to Board of Ed beginning in 27. And so this really does, on the city side, it really does sort of isolate the municipal budget and has it's kind of a status quo approach in terms of Board of Ed. Acknowledges that, whatever adjustments are made to the city's contributions to the Board of Ed, there will be a corresponding increase in the revenues raised for that. And that essentially means a mill rate increase. We have in the projections for the 5-year period, we do have a 1-year deficit projected in FY28. And that's followed by, 3 years of revenues exceeding expenditures. That's driven largely by the reval that is coming up that would affect the 2029 budget and the years that follow. The projected surpluses generated there would be then funds that are available for either mill rate reduction, additional increase in education, other initiatives, or some combination of those options. You'd see that over the course of the 5 years, we have budget increases of about 1.9% per year. These are our major revenue assumptions. And then in the table is the major revenue categories over the 5 years. We're assuming grand list growth of about 1.5% per year, except for fiscal year 29, which I alluded to earlier. Our city assessors' current projections for the results of revaluation based on recent sales data is for a 26.6% increase in the overall grand list. And that's all based on that reflects market changes, not growth or expansion. State aid, we're assuming, is flat throughout the 5-year planning period. Interest income, we have a reduction reflected for next year's budget, and then we hold it flat throughout the remaining 5 years. We have built in some additional income from development agreements that are in place at various stages of implementation, from just having been developed and approved by council all the way through certain developments that have begun construction. Those are expected to generate over the course of the 5 years between $645,000 to $1.5 million per year. And then all of our other sources, for the most part, are based on an assumed increase of 1% per year. And then just for perspective, when you take our property taxes and state aid, those two sources combined for roughly 95% of our total revenue picture, and everything else is 5% or less, depending on the year. So even when we have movements in interest income or charges for service or city clerk fees and those types of items, they represent a very small percentage of our overall budget. On the expenditure side, our major assumptions include some assumptions for payroll that basically average out to about 3.3% per year. There is an attrition factor built in to our 5-year forecast, and I would just want to bring to your attention that one of the ways that we've addressed in the FY27 budget relatively flat revenue growth is by increasing our attrition factor. So we've taken a somewhat more aggressive position on attrition, which represents our anticipated vacancies. So in the current fiscal year, our budget was based on an attrition factor of about 7.7%. For fiscal year 27, it's 10.6%. We carried that through to FY28, and then we back off of that rate in the final 3 years of the plan. And just for a historical perspective, we have over the past, I believe it was 8 to 10 years, our average attrition has been in the 13 to 14% range. So there is some room there, but we don't like to go all the way up to that historical average, because there is some corresponding increases in overtime expenses, which you see in the monthly reports that we submit, where especially in the area of public safety, we have to backfill to a certain extent vacant positions with overtime. Health insurance, we're assuming 7% increases per year. The pension forecast is based on our most recent 5-year forecast from the actuarial firm. There is an adjustment we are going to have to make to our FY27 budget for the ADEC between now and May. We did not receive an ADEC until after the mayor's budget was released, and there's about a $1.5 million adjustment that we will be making on the expenditure side between now and the final budget adoption in May. Our debt service is based on the $25 million GO bond, which is going through the approval process now, as well as the lease purchase, the capital lease purchase, which the MARB reviewed at its March meeting. Both of those are built into the debt projections, along with any existing debt we had for the stadium and for some remaining clean water debt. And when you bundle up all of our utilities and other non-personnel expenses, we've got average annual increases of about 2.7%. These major initiatives are described in a little bit more detail in the written report. We just spent roughly an hour talking about education finance, and as the superintendent and CFO explained, we've been working with the Board of Ed. The state's been involved in coming up with a multi-year plan to close their structural deficit. The mayor discussed economic development efforts, primarily in the area of developing and expanding our housing portfolio. One thing he didn't mention is we have continued to meet and work on potential shared services initiatives with the town of East Hartford. That is part of the OPM's Regional Performance Incentive Program. CROG has been facilitating those meetings, and we anticipate having an implementation plan for a pilot phase, which would look at probably 1 or 2 different operations to be ready for release in July. And we've also mentioned several times work we have been doing to look at ways we could reduce the long-term liability in the pension fund. And the task force has been formed. They generated an ask of the treasurer and the city's actuarial firm to review some options. And we're hopeful that we'll have some indication of what feasible options there are going forward shortly. And I also I didn't mention in here, in the written report, you'll see that we have a list of potential mitigation measures to address the projected deficit in fiscal year 28. Because it's a one-time deficit, we are looking at ways there are certain one-time measures that we could take, and I expect to be able to close that deficit between now and developing the FY28 budget. But the mayor mentioned that we have tax deed sale that we're planning. We anticipate that there may be some bond premium as a result of the general obligation bond issuance. We do have some additional contingency built in. And so I think that gap that's projected there, which is considerably less than 1% of the overall budget, that we will be in a position to mitigate that before we're developing the budget for FY28. That's a quick overview of our 5-year plan. And again, acknowledging that there are still a lot of moving parts and that it'll probably be another few days to a week before all the dust settles with respect to the state budget and where we land with the city's potential mill rate adjustments.
Thank you, Julian, for bringing us up to date on all of this. It is helpful. Did I hear or learn that you have changed the reval year by a year in this
Yes.
5-year plan? Okay.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. When we compare it to the prior plans, that's why we're seeing the bump up in 29 versus 28.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to confirm that. Any question? Yes, Lisa.
I actually have a question about that particular topic, about why you're delaying the reval a year.
The mayor wanted to give very housing initiatives as much of a chance to take root as possible and add to the grand list before we pursue the revaluation.
Okay. Can I ask more questions, Kim?
Of course.
Yeah.
Nobody else has their hand up.
Perfect. So just generally, I understand that there's all these conversations that are going on with regards to Hartford Public Schools and the structural issues that they face, and then some, state acknowledgement of the structures that they've created and changing of those structures. But, municipalities across the state do contribute more to their education every year and do provide annual increases to their Board of Education. So as I'm looking at your 5-year plan, and I know that you flag it as you flat fund, and it's possible that you may use some of your surplus to provide it to the Board of Education. I would love to see you build in some increases year over year to support your students, simply because that's what municipalities do across the state, is they don't level fund their education. And I just wanted to flag a typo that I saw when reading this on page 7, I believe, under education, your education section. Hartford Public Schools does not continue to receive additional funding. Statutorily, all districts are flat funded moving forward. There's going to be a change in this legislative session for next year, but once that one-time increase happens again, all districts are just slated to receive flat, full funding moving forward. So there's no built-in increase for any Board of Education across the state in the current statutes. That's it. Thank you, Kim.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that this board, Lisa, to comment off of your comments, is that I think this board has not just the members here, but even the prior members that are no longer with us, have pushed for the city to make a contribution and increase their contribution to the education, and versus doing one-time items along the way, or picking up some of their expenses on the city side versus the board side. I think that also skews the numbers if you're looking at expenses, if they're sitting on the city side versus the board side. That's all. I had a question, Julian, about your contracts. As we know that one is in negotiation, but that's a very small group, which is the lawyers. And you do have a large group that's coming up, or a couple. Well, the biggest group is going to be the police for fiscal year 26. June 30th is going to close. So that will be coming on the horizon for you. And 2 others, one being the professionals in local 2001, as well as the school crossing guards. If you and the one for the lawyers it's only 9 people, but it is the contract ended in 2025. My comment is I'm assuming that you have included increases in your budget to at least line up with being aware that you have some contracts that are going to be coming into negotiation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody on the OPM team have any other questions for this group? MARB members? I would like to pass on taking any action because I don't think we are in a position to take any action. So it does say possibility. It doesn't say we need to. I don't think we need to take a vote. I think we can just pass on that unless somebody feels differently. I would leave that to the members for their input. We all know that this budget is still a work in progress for both the city as well as the board. Mr. Beller.
As I had said earlier, and echoing other people before me, I'd agree with you. I'm not prepared to take action. I'd rather see the presentation made before the full MARB and after we've had some of the other information filled in over the course of the next few days.
Very good. So we're going to pass on taking action, Julian, and then we'll move down to agenda item number 7, which is going to be a status update on your obligation bonds and the leases. You did mention it, but I just, the status update in the process.
Yes. We have on the table a $25 million general obligation bond issuance and a master lease for capital equipment purchases, which would basically be a line of credit of up to $25 million. That the MARB in March recommended to the treasurer, state treasurer, and secretary of OPM to approve of those or give their consent with some conditions attached. And those conditions were some of them were around, how the bonds are structured, level principal, no limiting the maturity to 20 years or less. And then there were a couple of documents to provide, one of which was the city's updated 5-year capital improvement plan, which has been sent to the secretary and state treasurer, and then also the RFP for the master lease once it is available. And I just forwarded that over this morning. That was posted. And so that's sort of where we are. The city council has approved both the bond issuance and the master lease. With respect to the bond issuance, we're currently working with the bond advisors and the city treasurer's office and bond counsel on the official statement. We expect to be meeting with credit agencies just after budget adoption. We will be looking to get that signed letter of consent from the secretary and the treasurer the week of May 4th, which is next week. And we will be, then the current schedule is to close on the bonds the second week of June. And we're still on track for all of that. With respect to the capital lease, I mentioned that the RFP has been posted. The questions are due from vendors by May 7th, and then proposals are due by May 19th. And then at that point, once the proposals have been evaluated and a vendor selected, then the city would be in a position to begin ordering equipment. And we expect that to, begin probably no sooner than July before the city begins ordering equipment off of that.
Julian, you mentioned the week of the 4th and knowing that we have, sorry, I missed when the rating, that's exactly one of the things that I was going to ask. So go ahead, Kim, you can speak from Treasury. Kim
Hi,
Moore.
Julian, Kim Morse. I did hear your summary of all that. I just missed what you said. When are the rating agency presentations?
They're not scheduled yet. I think we're targeting mid-May.
I see.
And so that's a bit of a timeline problem because one of the conditions I thought was the fallout of those rating agencies, and we were looking for Treasury was looking for verification that this taking on new debt would not impact your credit rating. So I think we need to flip the approval, if at all possible, because that was one of the contingent items. So if the secretary and treasurer sign off on this without the conditions met.
Well, the conditions are in the letter of approval. So the conditions would be, so this is my understanding. I'm not going to pretend to be corporation counsel, but the way I was understanding it was
me either.
the conditions are, one of the conditions is conditioned on no impact on the credit rating. And so given that, should the city, as the city progresses through the process, were there to be a negative impact on the credit rating, that would basically put a stop to the issuance. But it wouldn't necessarily mean not issuing the letter. So I think we're looking at the letter as something to be able to, does that, but again, I'm not.
No, yeah, I will Treasury on what your interpretation is versus ours. I thought the credit would have happened beforehand.
So thank you, Kim. I will have to revisit the letter, Julian. So you're saying the approval is contingent upon receiving ratings as is, no downgrade or no negative. I don't know. I have to revisit the letter. So, okay.
Yeah, I'd have to go back, open it up as well, but it was no negative, no downgrade.
Okay. We'll take a look.
And one was the RFP that we just got this morning, so we can then share that with you if it wasn't provided. All right, so we will have some follow up on that item. Anything else that we need to discuss on that item? I'm going to look to John Mayer, just in case I'm missing anything. I don't hear John.
No, Kim, I'm sorry, I had to unmute.
Yep.
No, I think we're pretty much set on that.
Okay. Okay, very good, thank you. So I guess the next order of business is other, and under that is that we have a regularly scheduled meeting of the MARB, and that is on May 14th at the Legislative Building, and regular time 10 o'clock. If no one else has anything else for the business today, I would then look for a motion to adjourn.
David Biller, so moved.
Thank you, David.
Second.
Kevin, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. And Julian, I know that your hard work is not done yet. I'm sorry for you in that.
Don't be sorry.